Very warm welcome to all our Scottish friends and the new dawn of the HousingLIN in Scotland and this session HousingLIN Scotland presents. Over the years, we've had great relationships with many people, developing a real better understanding and knowledge sharing, partly supported by organisations like Hanover, Scotland, Bede and Northcott. And so we're really delighted that we're able to bring them all together this afternoon to really sort of put the spotlight on sort of really innovation and good forward thinking around what an ageing society might look like and looks like in Scotland and the response to that. Before we proceed, just to say also very thankful to UKRI for their support of the LIN. They very much appreciate the knowledge transfer and the business connect that the HousingLIN undertakes. And many of you will know that I was on the Healthy Ageing Challenge Advisory Board, which had several projects across Scotland and working closely with Judith Phillips and Vicky McCall and the like. So a warm welcome to anybody who's affiliated to those projects. But what we're going to do today is really look at sort of some real innovation and thinking around what it means around an ageing society in Scotland and the response to that, both in terms of our housing supply, in terms of our design for quality, adaptations and accessibility, and also technology and thinking about that sort of digital switchover. And we've got three fabulous presenters with us to take a little look at each of those. We're going to kick off with Angela Currie. I'm sure she needs no introduction. She's the chief exec of Hanover, Scotland, and I had the privilege of joining Angela and her board last month to really help understand the thinking about taking forward their next 5-year strategy and the manifesto that she's going to be talking about. Gavin, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Bede Housing Care were part of our HAPPI programme, our Technology for an Ageing Population, and you're going to draw attention to some of the advances and developments since then, and as your role as head of property management there. And many of you will also know Carla. Carla has spoken at various things with the LIN over the years, probably under the Future Leader programme, I think, when you first came to our attention. And you've grown into sort of working very closely as part of Northcott to think about the quality and around product development, and a very passionate champion around accessible housing and making sure that we have age-friendly housing right across the UK. And she's going to talk a little bit about her project as well. And as Sally said, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A, so please do post your questions and we'll respond to as many as we can before I bring this session to a close. But I'm going to ask Angela to kick off first and say thank you very much for joining us. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And I'm just going to try and find my slides because they've just miraculously disappeared off my screen.
While you're doing that, I shall just explain to Neil that upvoting means that you can put a thumbs up to a question. So if you think the question should merit a response from the panel, you can add, and anybody else can add a thumbs up to that. So the more thumbs up, that means it will go up the ladder, and we will respond to those questions with the most thumbs up and likes first. I hope that explains, Neil. Anyway, that interlude over to Angela.
Great, thank you for that. And hopefully you can all see my slides, no problem. Great, thank you for that. Joys of technology. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me along this afternoon. And just a little bit about Hanover, for those who may not know some of the basic information about the organisation. We're an older person specialist. Our turnover is around 50 million per year. We've got 4,700 homes for rent across Scotland, and as you can see on the map, they are dotted in quite a random fashion around the country. We've got about 600 employees, and so we cover 23 of the 29 mainland local authority areas, 3 office spaces, and we have a number of registered care and support services, as well as a telecare service that we deliver to our own tenants, and a number of commercial customers. So in Scottish terms, we're considered to be a large organisation. As an older person specialist, in a room full of people who know a lot about this, you will be very, very familiar with this graph that pretty much shows the massive shift in the number of older people in Scotland over a 20-year period. And it's pretty startling, isn't it? And I do look at this graph regularly. And I'm never failed to be surprised by the monumental shift in the number of older people that we'll have in this country by 2039. But conversely, what we have, of course, is a massive decrease in the number of younger working age people in our society, which is going to be a double whammy for us in terms of jobs and therefore our reliance on technology and modern ways of working is even greater. So the size of the challenge in Scotland is pretty significant. So we've got a shortage of older people's housing today. There's also going to be this huge increase in the number of older people, and we're virtually building no new older people's housing. There's a little smattering of it going on in the private sector. There's none that I'm aware of in the private rented sector, and we're really struggling as a group of specialist housing associations in Scotland to get funding or get the viability to stack up for new supply. So a real challenge. In amongst all of that, there is no national strategy in Scotland for older people or for an ageing population, and there certainly isn't one for housing. So it's a real challenge in terms of trying to get keep people in key positions to focus on this issue. And for a lot of us in the housing sector, we still feel that housing is not an equal partner with health and social care, certainly not in national policy or in funding terms. Of course, sitting in the background around all of this in Scotland is we have a national housing emergency. And the focus of that, unfortunately, is very much through the lens of it's about homelessness, and we're absolutely missing the conversation around older people. We have some estimates in Scotland about what the gap looks like in terms of older people's units that we need. And it's quite a few years old now, this piece of work, but it told us then we needed about 40,000 units over a short period of time, 5 years, to meet existing demand. So the whole sector in Scotland is facing significant challenges because there's so many aspects to it, and it's quite a complex one. So that's led Hanover in the countdown to the elections that Jeremy mentioned in next May, the Scottish elections. We have turned our attention to a fair bit of influencing work to try to address some of the challenges as we see them. So we've created a manifesto document which we've published, and we're in the process of meeting with key politicians to try and influence what they put in their own manifesto documents and influence their thinking and their understanding in general. So we've asked for 5 key things, and we've very much done this through the lens of housing rather than through the lens of housing and social care or housing and health, because you will mostly be aware of, most of you will be aware of the complexity of the challenges in each aspect of those 3 sectors is huge. And if you try to ask for too much, it starts to get lost. So we've tried to focus it in on our manifesto asks from a landlord perspective rather than from a care provider perspective, for example. So we're asking for a national vision. We've got to do something, and we've cited in the document very clearly the report that was published last year in England from the cross-party group on housing for older people and the recommendations in that, because it's absolutely brilliant, and we are sorely lagging behind in terms of having that piece of work done in Scotland. Of course, we're arguing for more homes. That speaks for itself, but we need some clearer targets. The whole system that sits around house building for the affordable housing sector will need to change to accommodate that. We've reviewed what's called Housing for Varying Needs in Scotland 2 years ago, and it still hasn't been published. So we're pushing for that. And of course, we're arguing that support services for older people in particular are diminishing rapidly, and we need to do something about that. And of course, we've got a real challenge with our ageing stock. A lot of our sheltered housing and very sheltered housing that Hanover has is 40 years old now. and it's not really fit for purpose anymore, particularly that bedsit provision type accommodation. So we're having to remodel a lot of that, but there's no grant funding around that type of work, so it's a costly business. So we have got a hopefully a bit of optimism in that we have some good signs from the current Scottish Government that they're taking the housing emergency a bit more seriously. And for example, they have created a new position, a new cabinet secretary position covering housing, and that the politician in that post is Mary McCallan, and she's brand new to housing, so she's on a massively steep learning curve. Of course, in social care, we now also have a minister, a new minister in that seat called Tom Arthur, who again is new to this and is on a really steep learning curve. But they're both really open and keen to chat and get involved and understand the issues so that they can help shape what comes next. But what it does tell us is that we have a bunch of new politicians around this who know very little about the sector and the complexities and the interdependencies that exist. So in our manifesto document, we've set out really clearly what they would need to change to achieve the outcomes we think we need, because people, these people don't really understand all the complexities around the policy, environment, the guidance, the legislation, all of these things. So hopefully that will be of use to them. Interestingly, though, SNP are predicted to win next year's election, but with a minority government, and they will need at least one other party to share power with. Right now, as of the weekend, the two parties vying for second position in the polling predictions in Scotland are Reform and Labour, and Reform are several points above Labour. So that is going to change, potentially change, the face of politics in Scotland if those polling predictions become a reality. So what are we doing other than lobbying in Hanover? Quite a lot. We've got a number of innovation projects underway. And like a lot of landlords, a lot of what we've done over the last couple of years has been asset management led. And we'll hear from Gavin in a minute about the work that Build are doing. And we've done a number of projects to tackle problems. And they have been entirely illuminating in terms of the data that we're generating now for a range of different, to really tackle a range of different problems or to understand them better, because the heating systems or the air quality or the connectivity in the area isn't working. So we're involved in a number of different projects, and the challenge with being involved in those is that we're using different systems to gather the data. We don't have one single system that we use at the moment to do projects like this. So it's been really interesting even from that perspective. And last year, or earlier this year, we published a report on a proactive calling project that was Scottish Government funded, with a couple of partners to test out using some of the systems for telecare in people's homes in a different way, in a preventative, proactive way. And the learning from that has been really, really interesting. But what I really wanted to talk about today was a piece of research that was published last month that Hanover funded along with a couple of other organisations to try to, I suppose, and I'm trying not to be dramatic, but save housing support in Scotland, because it has dwindled away to almost nothing in terms of the number of services that are commissioned for older people. So the research was phase two of a couple of pieces of work to assess the cost and benefits of typical services. And it was we commissioned cash to do that, but a number of professionals and academics were around to help deliver that, including Vicky McCall. So the work looked at a couple of the different models of housing support out there, and different types. So it wasn't just older people, there was a case study as well done on homelessness. And what the academics really understood was, housing support is hyper complex and therefore So is the funding arrangements around it. And actually, a lot of people really struggle to understand what housing support is because it's a term that's used to describe so many things in so many different ways. So the research contains a case study on Hanover on one of our very sheltered housing services. And essentially, it comes to the conclusion that for every pound invested in older people's housing support, there is a saving of £4.85. And there's been many studies done like this over the year in terms of return on investment. But we really wanted an up-to-date one done with the absolute stamp of authority from a strong academic base. And that's been really interesting. The homelessness case study is great as well. If you haven't seen this research, you must go and have a look at it. The homelessness one tells us that for every £1 you invest in homelessness prevention services, you get £12 return on investment. So it's phenomenal, isn't it? For those of us who've worked in the sector for as long as I have, we knew that already. But it's great to have the validation, isn't it? So the research recommendations not only tell us, what the costs and saving benefits are, but arguing for more support for providers to demonstrate impact, a better, more sustainable funding stream for housing support, and align that stream to national priorities and build capacity for us to measure the social value as well. So the research was commissioned by a group of partners and led by the Housing Support Enabling Unit in Scotland. And so we're now starting to think about, is there a phase 3 of this piece of work where we can all get better at measuring our social impact and outcomes? And the link to the research is on that document. So I suppose, in summary, really, the key points are that in Scotland, it feels like we're a way behind where we should be in terms of addressing the need for specialist older people's housing, that the very sheltered and the housing with care or extra care models are poorly understood, and we really need to address that lack of understanding around all of that, and that we hope the research findings will really help us as part of our push on the manifesto asks to get some traction to look at this area of the sector for Scotland. So I hope you found that a quick overview interesting and helpful.
Angela, that was wonderful and so wide-ranging, both from thinking about you organisationally, what it means for you, the types of current services you're delivering to make sure that older residents have a safe, secure, decent home, but also how to innovate, think about the asset management, and we hear a little bit more about that from Gavin, as well as strategically thinking about the sector as well. So both, that sort of that breadth is amazing, and I think credit to you and the team for the sort of for championing that. And I'm going to suggest we put the manifesto link in the chat box in a moment as well. But you touched on issues relating to technology, telecare, smart metering, etc. Somebody knows all about this really well, and work that Field have done over the years is Gavin, and he's going to share with us some of the things that are taking and some of the pressure points, but also some of the opportunities that are taking place, and how Gavin are relating to both their residents and their partners. So, Gavin, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Perfect. So thank you very much for the introduction to the Happy Hour webinar, and the really a shared practice learning piece that we've kind of been nicknaming joining the dots, and to follow what Angela has put there in our last slides, I don't think you could have put it better. And one of the ones there is that we are tackling aging stock and ensuring that it's fit for purpose. And as technology innovates, so must we as a sector. And that's how we're looking at just now, how AI can alter how we understand our stock. So to give a little bit of introduction, joining the dots was about finding out about how our properties, whilst linking assets and health and social care data sets, rolling them into one, producing the microdata, then taking that microdata out of what we're calling our data lake, and using that to have performance business decisions. So through conversations with our social work teams, we realised that there was a correlation between well-performing properties and the health and well-being of our tenants. This formed a project tagline of healthy environments, healthy lives. And this is really what started this project. So the project really wanted to look at how we take the technology-enabled care that's already within our developments, and how do we link that to the asset data, and how do those two correlate with each other, and where can AI and Power BI modeling and some of the new innovation points that are coming onto the market just now, how can we leverage some of these things? And it led us down the kind of take of, we are going to look at sensors within a property, and we'll come on to what that looks like within Beald's properties. And also just looking at making sure that we are going with tackling the ageing stock whilst making sure that we're doing the right thing for our tenants. So is it the right thing from a GDPR point of view? Are we ensuring that their data is safe? And where do we kind of go in the future? So the project started, as always, or most of our stuff is, with a little bit of funding. So there were 4 key partners involved in the project. So Beald have the properties and had the amazing tenants that wanted to come on the journey with us. Archangel were a platform provider, so the sensors that are fitted within our properties, they are going back to that data set. Farpoint are our third-party authenticators, and the reports linked later on, but wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing and making sure that our return on investment and the money that we're spending on our properties and the information that we're gathering was the right thing to do for our tenants. And as part of that as well, the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre and Glasgow City Region were the funders. So that's where we kind of started on our journey. So to take you into where we are just now, we have Langvout Court. Now, Langvout Court is a retirement housing development. It's 25 self-contained flats in communal areas within a remote and rural environment within the South Lanarkshire area of Scotland. We are utilising the LoRa National Infrastructure for Connectivity, so a system that's already been put in by the Scottish Government, and we are tapping into that to make sure that we are keeping our costs low in terms of our connectivity, but also making sure that that this network's available to others within the community that may not have the standpoint that Beald have. We've put a variety of sensors deployed across tenants' properties and communal spaces, also within boiler spaces, underfloor areas and in roofing areas. And it's trying to get a view of what that property is actually looking like. So we've already got the tech-enabled care, we're already looking after our tenants, but we really wanted to see, well, what else can we do within this property? Is this property performing the way that we need it to? And are things like the air quality, dampness measures and other environmental factors that may have an impact on tenants' life, how are they dealt with? So that kind of led us into, well, what do we need to fit? What do we need to understand? And where does this kind of come from? So we've got a range of sensors here. So just to run through them quickly on why they're important. So we have a multi-sensor that's fitted within each of the communal areas and also the flats that are in there. So they're PIR motion sensor detection, so they can detect if people are out with their bed of the morning, if they're leaving the property, but it can also pick up room occupancy. So how many people are using the room at a time? Is there a level of occupancy that might be dangerous for that type of property? And then it goes into more kind of environmental factors. So that's your ambient temperature, your humidity, calculations that would be required for relative humidity if you're going through dampness. Now, dampness is an industry just now. We know that AWAB law has taken effect in England and had a really stark conversation last week about how that looks for the Scottish marketplace and what we can do to kind of get ahead and make sure that our tenants are in conditions where these might occur. There are optional magnetic detection, which can be put on doors, cabinets for medicine, or other areas, and exit door, communal doors, and loft hatches, places that we wouldn't really want entrance to or can be monitored out with the time. So all that data that came in is used to inform decisions on what's happening in that property. So for example, there was 2 at Langvout. During the really cold Scottish winter that we experienced last year, we noticed that the communal areas, the temperature was dropping. We have sensors that you can see in area 2, the water temperature sensor here that was fitted to the communal boiler. And the AI algorithm picked up that there was a slowdown of the heat within the building, but also a slowdown of flow at the commercial boilers. So we were actually able to send an engineer to site before that boiler broke down, which, given that it was -13, the average age within the block was 70, we're getting really good with our kind of proactive maintenance. Now, the thermostatic radiator valve, which you can see from item 3 here, that's actually linked in to the communal and the sensors as well. So it can identify trends within areas that aren't being used. So, for example, there's a hairdresser's that we were heating 365 days a year. It's actually only used on a Thursday morning. So we can reduce the utilities in that area so that we can use that and produce that saving to go on to other things. Now, one of the big things that the sensor did highlight at Langvout is that we had a problem with air pollution. So we decided to go on ahead of that and replace the fans out. Now, we would have never been able to identify that by traditional building standards. We needed something in there that was going to allow us to do that. We've now replaced all the fans as part of a programme and some of the MVHR units within the property. And we've actually seen an increase in 37% in the air quality within those areas. A couple of the other ones that we're currently looking at just now is the water usage and leak detection. So we have that under baths, where areas where we're known prone to flooding, or where we've got areas where tenants are suffering from dementia. So we can get an early start on that. And we are also fitting the millimetre wave fall prevention and detection radars, which is a scanning device that can tell from AI algorithms and by mapping rooms on if people fall as a secondary to the tech-enabled care that's already in there. We can alert either family, friends, neighbours, or our BR24 contact centre that there's an occurrence within that area as well. Now, with everything that we do, we want to give tenants full visibility of what's happening in their property. So the last sensor there is purely that. It gives the tenants control to look at what's happening within their property and make sure that they know if it's going over a certain parts per million for the CO2, then they can go and open a window. So there was a little bit of tenant education rolled up into this progress as well. In terms of where we are just now, we have a multi-co-design dashboard that's produced by Archangel. We are monitoring damp, environmental, and other health-related conditions through these apps. We are working with families of the residents that are within the building to ensure that they've got access to this data as well, where provided and consent is given by the residents. We're using actionable insights and alerts that we can send to either ourselves through BR24 or to the local health and social care partnerships. We're providing powerful data analytics round about what the AI can do, looks at the building, what our future programming may look like. But we've also got some manual alert rules and machine learning that we're doing actually ourselves. And I think it's really important to stress that one of the common misconceptions of sensors that these are not designed to replace human interaction. They are merely data tools to make informed decisions. So by being proactive by both on the property side and the healthcare side, we can promote an integrated asset housing and care system that's less invasive for the residents that we have within our buildings. Now, the evidence in action. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Farpoint carried out an independent validation of our trial, and this is what they came up with. So I'm not going to go into depth on what that looks like today, but the last slide in today's presentation has a QR link, and we'll link that up to the site. But one of the big things that came across is that we actually managed to reduce utility costs. We've reduced maintenance costs and visits to site by the PMO. We've reduced manual checks for things like Legionella and boiler functionality. We've improved tenant safety by identifying areas that were being accessed out of hours or by people that shouldn't have been within the building. We've improved our regulatory compliance round about dampness, so we can provide that information to anyone on anything that comes in cases like the IWAB's law or legal cases or anything else within the building. It's supported our net zero targets by proving real-time investment on some of the works that we've done. But the biggest thing for us is giving us transparency on the way that we deal with our tenants. So if they tell us that a communal area is cold, we can go and look at that data. And if it's cold, we can do something about it. If they think the air quality within the communal areas is low, we can monitor that and we can set the AI algorithm to check these types of things. So as I say, at the end of this report, there is a QR code. I would welcome anybody to read that report. It does make some really good reading, and it's also moved us into a scalability phase. So what it looks like for us at Build and what's next for us is a complete integrated housing and care application, which we are designing under a digital estate However, it does have care elements part of this. It looks at housing management and compliance, mixing with social care, wellbeing and health centres, and utilising the 3,500 LoRaWAN sensors that are available to ensure that we can meet any tenant's needs. So this can be from everything from windows and doors closed to humidity, through gas usage, gas leaks, and things that keep people safe within their properties. So that's where we're pushing just now, to provide a tailored solution for our tenants who may or may not want these things, and it's completely up to them, but we can offer these as a very open topic. And this is really what the future looks like for us. An integrated property, we know our developments, we know our people, we can keep people safe, and agree that we can have levels of comfort whilst ensuring compliance with our regulatory needs. In terms of where we go now, we are moving out to scalability of the project. So we've identified another 22 sites with 14,000 houses. We're currently due to start that in December with a rollout over an 18-month period. And the full evaluation report that we carried out for phase 1 can be found at the QR link before. And I'll hand back to Jeremy.
Hey, that was great, and a real tour de force around the sort of the use of AI. I've learned a new word, data lake. Thank you very much for that, but also how to share that and spread that in terms of making informed decisions, both that residents can take control, but also how you help manage building management systems and and the assets beyond that. I was conscious you also had a slide which some people may have not seen, which was which had a picture of a house and a variety of different type of sensor technologies. I think that was a really useful picture, and perhaps we can sort of share that with the slides separately after this event, because I think a lot of people want to go back to that. And again, also thanks for drawing to attention to several of your pieces of work, including Farpoint. You may not know they're working in England too, and only this month with the Department of Health to really better understand the preparedness and state of readiness for the care and support sector around the digital switchover for January 27. So very topical, really great, and thanks very much. Do stay on, because we'll come back to some questions. I know there are one or two already being posted. But it gives me great pleasure to move on to Carla. Today marks not just only Carla's presentation to this happy hour and HousingLIN Scotland Presents, but the birth of a new relationship between HousingLIN and Northcott. Thanks very much for joining our small and growing family of sponsors, and it's really wonderful that you could come and sort of share with us about your work. Both in sort of looking at rurality, but also thinking more about the procurement and the construction of buildings and what that means in terms of what home means for an aging population. So, Carla, without further ado, over to you to age in place.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeremy, and thank you so much for inviting me, Jeremy and Sally and the rest of the team. We're delighted that today we started becoming closer in terms of the sponsorship and working together. And yes, I'm very, very excited of what's coming. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Carla Reséndiz, Product Development Manager at Northcott, and I will share with you our approach to designing homes to age in place, where we're working to rethink the role of homes in rural areas from an off-site construction perspective. But first of all, I would like to introduce Northcott. What do we do? We design and manufacture products for the built environment, including timber frame kits, doors, windows, and we also have design services, all from the far north of Scotland, Caithness. If people are also aware of our location, we are in the far, far north near John O'Groats, and our manufacturing facilities in Bauer. And our vision is to manufacture sustainable, accessible, and affordable products that enhance people's lives and benefit our community. We are basically working towards teamwork, innovation, and quality. Northcote has been operating for almost 42 years, delivering more than 1,000 kit homes to the self-build market, and mainly focused for creating bespoke forever homes in rural areas. We realized that there was an increasing demand for future-proofed homes, so we started looking at the requirements from a design perspective. In the pictures, you can see on the left the team that manufactures the timber frame kits, and on the right, the team that works for the retrofit projects. To start with, we had a close look at the population shift, where the age groups of plus 65 are increasing, while younger age groups continue to decrease. We also had a look at the healthy life expectancy and questions ourselves, what can our homes do to support us if our health changes in later life? And more importantly, we saw the need to explore how our homes can support healthy lifestyles and extend the number of years we enjoy our health. In this case, we are thinking of the challenge of, is it needed to move home in later life? And this is what started framing the different questions. The reports from the Scottish government show that the north of Scotland is sparsely populated and that people over 45 are more likely to live in rural Scotland. And we can see there's accessible rural areas, but also remote rural areas. Additional to this, we have various studies showing the housing deficiencies in the UK, we called the indoor air quality, as Gavin and Angela were mentioning as well. And there's a lot of design-related issues that could be tackled. So in the UK as well, the housing is not just about the new homes and not meeting the housing demand. It's also about the lack of homes that are adaptable, accessible, and truly affordable. And we can see here that too often affordability comes with a cost of quality and sometimes affecting the occupants' dignity and health. So we started looking at the place regarding the age-friendly environments, and we realized that yes, the homes are a critical factor of age-friendly environments, together with other key factors, including the community, being involved with others, having different activities, employment, etc. And when we started working with this, we ran a survey with our self-build customers to understand which services they had at hand. And the result showed that the green areas were the most accessible benefit they had at hand. You can see here one example of a house that possibly is located in a very remote location. And the most concerning part here was that the GP surgery or a supermarket were sometimes 1 to 2 hours away from their home. So that's part of the challenges that we were looking at. So there's various descriptions of the need regarding housing for the aging population. We can see that the houses should include care-ready features, integrating technologies, and helping the occupants to have an increasing sense of autonomy. So we can see these and various other reflections about what's required, but we wanted to come with a solution. So we used Bauma's approach to first understand the motivations, beliefs, and values and needs to ensure we were making the right product. And then we ran a product development process to evaluate the reactions, interactions, and usability. We also use a human-centered design lens, which starts with the people we're designing for and ends with the solutions that are tailor-made to suit their needs. And our work is in the intersection, I would say, of home design. This includes the layout. It also includes the fabric configuration, the integrating smart home technologies, and off-site construction. To share a little bit more about offsite construction, it's a group of methods that enable efficient, high-quality housing, basically, that are models that are adaptable and scalable. Our specific approach is with timber structural panels. And here I share a diagram with the method that we followed for 3 years. This was a part of a KTP project supported by Innovate UK and delivered with TISA University. And this method shows a divergent and convergent process that was framed by the double diamond design process by the Design Council. So it starts with discovering, defining, developing, and deliver. We work together with 4 different groups to gather user insights. We work with care home residents, community groups, forever home sale builders, and forever home adaptations, people who were adapting their forever homes to stay there in later life. And we gathered insights from all of them together with an expert panel. From this, we created and used a design brief. Our architectural design team, together with the 4 groups, designed a modular building blocks to create a Will-Be Homes range. This was then progressed further with the community-led housing group, which is this one, the number 3. And the models were validated using virtual reality, and the design afterwards, we gathered feedback from the community, the design was adjusted, and then we progressed to the design for manufacturing and assembly process. So after this, the homes were manufactured here in Bauer, and then they were delivered, erected, and for the surprise of the community-led housing group, this took only 1 week. In previous projects they mentioned, this same process took three months. And it will recently people started living in them earlier this year, just in March. So I'm very excited to be starting our very first post-occupancy evaluation as a manufacturing company. We have received a Future Leaders Fellowship from UKI Innovate UK, and our next steps will be basically focusing on learning and iterating this design process. Basically, we're gonna run a case study for basically we're gonna assess the performance versus the design stage simulations. We're gonna co-produce a system to manage home and care with community-led housing groups, and we're gonna deliver guidelines for virtual and built home environments. So this will help us implement a data-informed design process that will be combined with future imaginaries. And basically what we want to do is to gain a better understanding about how to make future-proof design invisible and aiming to make it a new standard. And just before leaving, I would like to leave you with a quote from Victor Papanek, which says that the only important thing about design is how it relates to people. So thank you so much for your attention. And I will be happy to continue the conversation as well. Here's my email.
Well, thank you. And what I loved about your presentation and how you shared that right at the end was about how it's people-centered. I think you touched on issues around co-production there. You talked about the post-occupancy, which often is something we forget about in terms of the livability of our homes, not just making sure that they are physically, it's also about the social connections in those as well. And so while you come from a manufacturing, construction, and sort of testing out and innovating, you're also very much grounded in the people bit as well. So very, very, very important element. So can I just say thank you to all 3 of you for 3 wonderful presentations. I hope you agree they sort of flowed seamlessly, really. Who would have thought? But it was very well crafted. So again, really, really great. And we've also had some really great questions come up So please, there's now an opportunity over the next sort of 6 or 7 minutes for people to post any other questions. We've had, Neil, I hope you can see, we have been upvoted on a few of them as well. And I think, but I'm just going to start off with a simple one, I hope, for you, Gavin, because I think there's some issues about one of your slides talk about different types of sensors, and you talked about what device. The question from Julian is what device picked up the air quality issue one. Or there may be more than one sensor, or more than one device.
Yeah, so the sensor that we use for picking up the air quality and particular, so it's a multi-sensor, but it's the Tectelic Vivid Smart Room sensor, and it's the 6-in-1.
Right. Thanks for that. And Julian, I'm going to stay with you because actually the most popular question was one of yours, and also somebody who's from an anonymous. So let's just deal with those. A lot of older people we speak really want to stay in their own homes and communities, and have lived there for decades. In that vein, do we need to make funding for awareness of and better processes and options for adaptations just as important as new accessible provision? Angela, can I come to you first? I think you headlined on some of this as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And listen, the vast majority of older people will end up staying at home, won't they? And their house will be suitable. They'll get any adaptations that they need done. They'll get support from social work to navigate the systems they might need to achieve that. And in a lot of places, it does work relatively well. But there are still a significant number of older people, because of the home they're in or the type of support they need, just can't live at home and in the family home. And the point you're making about, do people have any idea what the options are and how to get advice and information on those options? The answer is no, they really don't. So we're really lacking a sort of trigger point in someone's life, probably in their mid 50s to 60s, that says, you've got to go and learn about this stuff and make sure you're prepared. Because one of the things that we are very much aware of is a lot of the people who come into our homes come in on the back of an emergency rather than a very well planned and thought out approach. And one of the most common bits of feedback I hear is when I go visiting around our developments is, do you like living here? Yeah, I love it. I wished I had known about it and moved here 5, 10 years ago. That is the resounding story. So one of our big strategic aims in the last couple of years has been around raising awareness of what older people's housing is, what the models are, and how to access them, because there's just such a lack of information and understanding out there that we've all got a job to try and change that in this country.
And Carla, any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, I think just in terms of the when I mentioned about our research and how we work with care homes, for example, I think we had a very similar experience to what just Angela said. We wanted to learn how people started coming to live there, etc. And they said that basically, just as you said, it was more a reactive rather than a proactive approach, that decision. So I just think that there's one book it's called, I think, when you're 64, and it's very specific, that talks about that just at this very stage you have to start thinking about all of this. But as Angela said even earlier, I think it's critical to think about that, and I think also in general healthy aging, it comes together with healthy living. It can be at any stage, and all the factors that Gavin and Angela said, they affect our health at any age as well. So being conscious of indoor air quality is very important, even for younger people as well. So I think it's very just considering a more proactive approach to this would be very important, I think.
Right. And Gavin, Julian then also asked about selling alternative housing options with communities, and you talked about the need to scale different types of provision. You know, the use of technology, the use of housing typologies. Any thoughts about that in terms of how we need to look at a broad range of accommodation types to support people making choices for independent living, and you know what sort of access to advice and information may be available to enable that? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the access to advice is the core part of that. So when people think of adaptations, they only think of really two things, and that's bathrooms and stair lifts. And
Mhm.
adaptations have come on a long way in the last kind of 10 years. They're a lot less clinical. They've been better designed, and as more people have innovated around the sector, and I know Beeld and Hanover have really good design guides around about that. It's not just about this, it's about the daily living activities and making sure that those things aren't clinical. But yeah, I think there is a development piece there that when we look at our communities, that it's not just going out and looking at these big plots of land that are attractive for new build, but it's also looking at buildings within communities that might not be used anymore, or have been community asset transfers that haven't quite worked for council developments. And it's trying to identify those parts of lands and these deals that can be done to keep people within their communities instead of moving out into the new build approach. And I know that a lot of work's been done over the last year to identify areas of land within areas that are already predominantly social housing stock to make sure that we can do that type of thing. But I really think it's down to the individuals that are looking at these deals. They need to be trained up to know what they're looking at, and how that development approach takes shape, not just in the new build environment, but also within the communities that are already there, and repurposing of the assets that might already be within the care stock. So Beeld have a lot of closed assets that used to be care homes that are actually perfect for redevelopment. So it's looking, and again, it's back to knowing your stock, and knowing your communities, and knowing where you can kind of move into these types of areas.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, I'm just conscious, based on all your replies, that information advice, and Judith will remember this from the task force, was a core strand. In fact, it formulates one of the 10 chapters, and having that bedrock linked to, and I think all of you talked about proactive or preventative approaches, but also I think there's a move to enabling people to be much more deterministic about what their own solutions might be. So it's about being armed with appropriate information, to support not just a planned care or a housing need, but also a self-care, or identify the right solution for them in their locality. So thanks very much for all your answers. And Carla, you've also put Louise Ansari's book. In fact, you may not know, but Louise is a former director at the Centre for Aging Better, and she wrote that great book. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing that. The final two questions, and we've got another 5 minutes or so, and please do post some more if you have time. But the final two really is about the types of partnership. And I was struck by Carla's presentation around the link between space planning and aging. And I was thinking sort of both urban gerontology and spatial and gerontology, thinking about the infrastructure that's needed to think about where we design, develop, and manage both aging in place, but also specialist housing. And part of this is also to know who the relationships are. And I think all three of you talked about the partnerships and relationships. The first question from Paul Shaw is about making those strategic relationships with the NHS. Now, he comes from, because they're also testing Archangel, but I was just wondering, rather than just the product, if we could just talk about that sort of partnership with the NHS. Angela, because again, I think that was part of your manifesto asks as well.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge, isn't it? Operationally, I think it's knowing the people in your area, because in Scotland, NHSs are, divvied up across a number of boards, and then within that there is the people who work at particular locality levels. So you have to get to know who those people are and what their role is if you ever want to to engage with them in a meaningful way on a local project. And we've had varying success around some of that over the years. A good example would be we worked in partnership up in the northeast of Scotland in Murray Council area, when the local hospital was closing down. As part of a housing with care development that we were building, we built a wing, although it technically wasn't a wing, it was just part of the building, of 5 properties to be used as almost hospital provision following the closure of a hospital. And it worked really well, was in place for 5 years. And then, budget constraints bit, and all of a sudden NHS decide they don't want to be the partners in this development and this project, and want to end the contract. So there are ways of doing it if you can find the right people to get engaged, and if you're providing a solution for them in a time of crisis, then that you're more likely to get them round the table. But it's not guaranteed, and it's quite hard to figure out where you go if you're not getting any traction, given it's such a big organisation.
And I think, as Carla touched on, it's the GP, so it's both primary and acute sector and broader. And Gavin, is that something you've experienced as well in terms of your residents?
Yeah, certainly. The part in terms of the partnership agreements, it seems to be on a local level, and again, it's based on area perception of what the savings might be to either council services or health and social care partnerships. And that was one of the real reasons round about the third party verification, is to say, look, we can do this for you. We're not asking for any of your resource or any of your time. We can provide a solution to some of the problems, and then it becomes a joint working thing. We've had the health and social care buy-in to the project that we're doing, based on they see that they can use this to enhance some of their offering as well. But it was really hard to get in the door. That partnership had to really be founded around about a couple of meetings of what we can do for each other, and joining the kind of what their requirements are against what our needs were, type of thing. But ultimately, it came down to fiscal or financial input. We can save time and we can save money for services that are already under incredible demand.
Well, look, we're going to sneak in one or two final questions. One which is around that geospatial, that sort of linking of the GP and supermarket. So I'll ask Carla to respond to that. Graham asks specifically for Gavin, do you envisage needing to redesign operational teams in the light of becoming more of a data-led service? And Esther, you touched on the fact there's great work and innovation going on in the sector, which is not getting more wider recognition. It should, because it's really impactful. So can I start with Gavin, and I'll go to Carla, and I'm going to give Angela the last word. So Gavin, first off, to wrap some of those questions into an answer.
Yeah, certainly. So in terms of redesigning teams, absolutely. So we've actually, out of the pilot that we've done, we've brought a project manager in, and that project manager is looking around about transformational change and innovation change within the sector, particularly with scaling this up as well. In terms of the wider recognition, it is starting to come out there. We are due a visit from the Housing Minister at some point, with dates to be confirmed. But yeah, it's definitely, it's getting out there, making sure that people know that this is happening, but also getting the reports out there so that the lessons learned can be adopted. And at the end of the day, the only people that really win in this scenario are the tenants. There's no competitive edge here. So it's about being open and not everybody running pilots, but actually running this together as a sector-wide, and really what you're doing with the HousingLIN network, Jeremy.
Brilliant. Now, Carla, you talked about in your slides about that knowledge diffusion, testing out. Any other thoughts around that?
Yes, I would like to say two things about it. I think most of the people who are living in these locations could be, in case it's a new build, the design is coming or is being fueled based on past experiences. Basically living in a very crowded area, full of traffic, etc., and wanting something different. And we are wanting to change the design approach, in this case, more future, using future imaginaries. And we want, instead of making the design decisions based on those past experience, also include that future self-vision as well. And I also think that it's very important to look at these type of projects for new build, for community-led housing as well. This would be
nice.
also retrofitting, and includes basically creating these rural places that are thriving. And when we have that perspective, it also includes services, key services, and more basically what the occupants would be needing in later life as well. So I think having that lens of community-led housing is very important for creating this place for aging in place.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that insight. And Angela?
Yeah, I think I echo what Gavin said about having the HousingLIN in Scotland will be really helpful to address, Esther's point about how do we make sure we get recognition for all the projects that go on and all the learning that goes on, and actually start to get things really well embedded in the sector as opposed to them being pilots that start and finish and the learning sits on the shelf. I think the design of operation or the redesign of operational teams is utterly inevitable, and so it should be, because we are moving into this dawn of a new era where what we do and how we provide services is going to have to start to change quite rapidly, because the shift in the demographics is going to dictate that, isn't it? So we've got to embrace that and be fairly bold. And the final point, I suppose, I would say about the partnership piece in the land and where we build and how we address that. We've got this massive issue around the decline of town centres in Scotland. So we've got empty properties galore up and down high streets, and we've got to get more imaginative about how we plug into that opportunity, because that's the ideal place for older people to live well-connected lives with all these facilities around them. And we need to, absolutely grasp that one a bit more firmly, I think, in terms of the debate as we go forward. And a good example of that is we are working with a fledgling co-housing group in Kirkintilloch who are really interested in doing something very specific in an old school, and bringing that back to life, and trying a model that we know works, but again, it's never really been scaled across the UK, never mind in Scotland.
Well, Angela, thanks very much, and we very much look forward to following that, in particular, and I reference to both co-housing and community-led housing. Interestingly, last week at our happy hour, we put the spotlight on some of those initiatives in England, and we will be looking further at those as we progress later this year and into next year. Can I just thank everybody for their contributions this afternoon? If this is the first time that you've joined us, we intend to hold 2 series a year, and we'll be drawing our current Happy Hour series to a close with Happy Awareness Week on the week of the 15th of December. But more importantly, we're also keen to build on the learning that everybody's shared with us today. And part of the reason why we want to develop the HousingLIN Scotland is to be a centre for best practice and knowledge sharing. And we're delighted to say that we've secured some funding from the Vivenza Foundation so that we can embed that over the next 5 years. And Judith Phillips, who's with us this afternoon, is on our board. And in addition to that, we've got the SFHA, the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, on our Vivenza funded board, called SHAPE, Strategic Housing for an Ageing Population. And our mission is very much about evidence and exchanging that. And we will be developing a series of labs to enable partnerships to flourish. So more about that next year when we get the program up and running. We're also very happy for other people to join our newly formed steering group. If you would like to become a member and become a sponsor of the LIN in Scotland, please let us know. And finally, can I thank everybody who's presented this afternoon, but also to the team behind the scenes for making this happy hour possible. We have 2 happy hours next week, one on the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act in England, and then picking up on what Gavin was talking about, one specifically looking at AI and data from a housing management point of view. So again, Gavin, you've given us a great taster already. You may like to join us next week as well. And all it leaves me to say is to wish you a happy evening, and perhaps you get a chance to have a happy hour now in your own homes. Okay, bye for now.